Hello, I'm the person in the top left corner. My name is Bettina Berendt. I'm with TU Berlin, Weizenbaum Institute and KU Leuven. And I will be talking to you about consensual counterfeit people. So what are counterfeit people? Philosopher Daniel Dennett earlier this year coined this term using the idea of counterfeit money, which can pass for real. So he observes that basically today everybody with AI and other computational technology can create counterfeit people who can pass for real in many of the new digital environments we have created. And his main claim is that these counterfeit people are the most dangerous artifacts in human history. They're capable of destroying economies and human freedom itself, a huge cost to human trust, and thereby destroying democracy and civilization. He concludes with a call: we must outlaw both the creation of counterfeit people and the passing along of them. The penalties should be extremely severe. It's very interesting what happens when you talk to people about these claims and these calls. So we have things like obvious deep fakes, such as Ukrainian President Zelensky supposedly calling on his people to lay down their arms and return to their families. This was quickly debunked as a deepfake, and a resounding echo of "this is bad" resulted. But there's also other applications. Other politicians, such as Narendra Modi, have used very highly realistic simulations of themselves in their election campaigns. India is a huge country, and back in 2014, many different electronic copies of Modi toured the country, enabling him to have election rallies at the same time in many different places, interacting with objects on the stage. This idea caught on in other election campaigns as well. Interestingly enough, some of these life-sized hologram-like projections even warn you against fake news. And of course, there is the big area of entertainment. So when you go to an ABBA Voyage concert, not only do you see very convincing performers of ABBA pop songs, but they're also a couple of decades younger than the real ones. So politicians are happy, the stars are happy, the audience is happy. What's the problem? It's a good use. Apparently, things are not so easy with these counterfeits. So what questions can we ask about counterfeiting people to come closer to the problematic here? The first is a sanity check. Does it work? Cognitively, we now all experience chatbots every day, and maybe it's not a coincidence that Daniel Dennett is so vocal about that, because a digital twin of his exists that has been created by colleagues Strasser and Schwitzgebel, and it's very convincing, making it difficult even for long-term collaborators to tell the DigiDan from the real Dan. Emotionally, there's been a lot of research on the 3D events. These avatars can create a sense of co-presence and immediacy. Live audiences sharing a physical space and an emotional experience create this incredible emotional experience for themselves. But apparently, this even works in a one-to-one setting, as we see in the increasingly growing market for video calls and avatars in them. So, as if you're interacting with an emotional companion on Replica, or if you're downloading your Replica for your video calls, who looks always professional, never has a bad hair day, and supposedly even protects your privacy. We can expect that generative AI is going to move much more strongly into all these areas. So just think of the election rallies with Q&A sessions, and it will become increasingly normalized to interact with avatars. So if everybody's happy, what's the problem in these consensual uses? I think the first big topic we need to talk about is accountability. Will we create new rules, or will we experience a breakdown? In real life, It is your word that characterizes who you are. If you misspeak, you're responsible, you bear the consequences. But if your avatar misspoke, what then? And given the pressures of today's work life, there will be the pressure to multitask, to have many avatars at once in many different video calls. How can you even keep track of all of them, let alone treat the misspeaking? And I guess it's this problem of accountability that will contribute a lot to the erosion of trust and therefore democracy that Dana talks about. And of course, there is, with all these possibilities of creating so much speech, the very real risk of control and manipulation. And then we should not forget that if there's counterfeit people, there will be unemployed real people. This plays out at the moment in the Hollywood actors' strike. Interestingly, the background performers have apparently gotten the proposal to go into the studio for a day, let their bodies and movements and faces be scanned. Then they can go home. They're no longer needed because the companies own that scan, the likeness, and can use it for whatever. No consent is mentioned here with no further consent. But remember, at the beginning, this is a contract where everybody is happy, supposedly. It's the studio bosses, it's the stars, it's the background performers. And still something seems to be amiss. So, do we have any legal protection against this at the moment? To find out, I parameterized this space. I thought the depicted person and the interacting person can both exist, be aware of the counterfeit, consent to the counterfeit, or not. This gives us 64 scenarios. These can be grouped and some of them don't make much sense. And I would like to share 3 big insights from you. So there seem to be 3 types of protection that cover some scenarios. The depicted person not consenting is a personality right violation, which could go against laws against impersonation, such as they exist, for example, in California. The interacting person not being aware of the counterfeit is a big thing in the upcoming European Union AI Act regulation of all things AI. There is the requirement in there to inform people that they're interacting with an AI. What if they're aware but not consenting? I would hope that they can contest this solely automated decision made by the avatar in line with the European Union's GDPR data protection law. But we'll have to see what cases will be brought to courts and how they will play out. We also see reduced protection in some areas, such as if the depicted person does not exist because they're just a conglomerate of features. And there's no protection if the depicted and interacting consent. So we have a pretty patchy protection here. And why is that a problem? And I want to engage with 3 popular arguments here. The first would be that a ban would violate rights. And that comes back to the consent. If depicted and interacting consent, it's a legitimate expression of human autonomy. Very fundamental right. Yes, but we've had a big discussion about consent and informed consent and the problems of realizing that, especially in electronic spaces for the past years, many years in a discussion on privacy and data protection. It's not that easy. Consent is also a very individual-centered notion that tends to neglect external effects like the ones we've seen above. Given that there are laws that protect people from themselves against their own autonomy, maybe we need that here too. A second frequent argument is that a ban would preclude good consequences. Proponents say the technology itself should be allowed, so it will get better and better and more convincing all the time. Only the bad uses should be prohibited and penalized. The problem is, speech acts can have real consequences immediately, long before legal persecution takes time. Just think of your country's leader telling you to lay down your arms or pick up arms, as the case may be, and the very real consequences that can happen very fast. A third argument is that this would address a non-problem. As with other media, humankind will come up with workable ways of authentication and will be able to tell the counterfeits. That has happened to some extent in the past, but I'm not so sure. If we look at signatures, a very good and long-standing system of authentication, it's just not catching on in the electronic realm as it should, because these infrastructures are very cumbersome, extremely expensive. So we're not really there yet. And this unsatisfactory situation brings us back to the discussion question for the Q&A. Do we want a ban? Do we want to put the genie back into the bottle? Can we learn something from historical examples such as the phasing out of CFCs? What about bans that exist and have a good intent but are very patchily enforced, but they're still better than nothing? Think of landmines or cluster ammunition. Details, how would we do it? Would we want exemptions for the arts, for the sciences? Would we have exemptions to the exemptions, like for movie actors, workers' rights? And many more questions. I look forward to meeting you in the Q&A and discussing this. Thank you.